Hi, my name is Akiva Reagan, and I wrote a book in Hebrew called The Mystery of the Encounter, a book that tries to explain the book I and Thou, written by Martin Buber. The purpose of this video is to explain the main idea of the book I and Thou in a visual way, and to give a wider context to the main ideas of that book. So if you love art and you are also interested in understanding Martin Buber's ideas, I hope this video will be a good introductory to this subject. So the book I and Thou, first and foremost, deals with the subject of God and our connection to God. Now, we're used to thinking about God in the context of a certain religion or faith, but in Martin Buber's book, the idea of God is addressed in a very different manner. And I will try to explain that perspective through a very broad, yet in my view, instrumental historical overview of the relationship between art and the idea of God. I will be focusing on comparing paintings from the Italian Renaissance to paintings from a different kind of Renaissance, that of the Low Countries, and also to paintings from the Dutch Golden Era that came afterwards. This comparison, in my view, will help us understand the main idea of the book I and Thou. So, historically speaking, art began as a religious endeavor. The first sculptures in history were gods carved out of stone, probably bearers of mystical powers. The first paintings in history were ritualistic cave paintings trying to invoke the gods of nature to come to our assistance. So the relationship between art and religion was very strong throughout all of human history. This special relationship between religion and art culminated in Christian Europe, and up until the 15th century, we hardly find any art that is not of a religious nature. Now, the 15th century saw the beginning of the famous Italian Renaissance, and this Renaissance, although groundbreaking in terms of quality and realism, and also in portraying subjects that weren't only part of the Christian world, but were part of the Greek and Roman mythology, still this Renaissance hadn't abandoned the idea of art as an expression of the mythical and the supreme. Absent from this Renaissance are the simple people and the description of their daily lives. So in this sense, the Italian Renaissance, although groundbreaking in many ways, is still a continuation of the world of art as had manifested in previous generations. So to understand this, let's take a look at a few paintings from the Italian Renaissance and compare them to a different kind of Renaissance, the Renaissance of the Low Countries. So we'll start from Botticelli, who describes a meeting between Mars, the Roman god of war, and Venus, the Roman goddess of beauty, in a painting called Venus and Mars. In this painting, we see Venus, who is looking towards Mars, with a certain poignance as he falls into deep sleep. Around the gods are little satyrs who accompany their meeting with a lot of mischief and laughter. This painting is a great example of Renaissance artists using Roman mythological characters in their paintings instead of Christian characters. Let's continue to another famous Italian Renaissance artist, Michelangelo, who on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican painted, among other themes, the creation of man. In this painting, we see the Creator, God, engulfed by different figures, holding out his finger towards that of Adam, which is reaching back to him. Take notice of the gap between Adam and God's fingers, a gap which perhaps expresses the never-ending distance between ourselves and the source from which we came from. We will end our Renaissance tour with Caravaggio, who is the harbinger of a new era in the history of art called the Baroque, an era characterized by a dynamic drama occurring inside the artistic creation. In this painting, Caravaggio describes a story from the Gospels in which Jesus enters the custom house and calls Matthew to join him. Jesus appears here pointing his finger confidently towards Matthew. The realism in this painting is quite stunning, especially when you consider the fact that Caravaggio is portraying a religious scene with holy men, yet he allows himself to portray this scene in a realistic manner and in a way that we can truly relate to. So these paintings are a good representation of the spirit of the Italian Renaissance. And let's see the difference between this Renaissance and the style of painting which developed concurrently in the Low Countries, modern-day Holland and Belgium, an era which is called the Renaissance of the Low Countries. And this comparison will give us a good idea of Martin Buber's ideas from an art perspective. So the first artist that people point out to in the context of the Renaissance of the Low Countries is Pieter Bruegel the Elder, an artist from the 16th century who lived in Antwerp and Brussels. Here is one of my favorite paintings by him called The Hunters in the Snow. The painting depicts people coming back from a hard day's work. It is not a scene that is meant to be hung in a church or to glorify a convent. It is a simple depiction of a quiet, snowy village. The only sounds that might come to mind looking at these paintings are perhaps the boots walking through the snow, the gentle crackling of the wood burning in the fire, the flapping wings of the crows, and maybe the distant children playing in the frozen lake. And for some reason, the artist decided that this simple village and these common people, who are not gods or prophets, are great subjects for his artwork. This transition from depicting saints and gods to showing villagers making their way home through the snowy landscape is a deep and profound change in the world of art. It doesn't occur without a wider context. In the background of this transition is also a religious struggle between Catholics and Protestants. This struggle, perhaps like the corresponding artistic change, is an expression of a deeper movement within the consciousness of man, a movement seeking to express the profoundness of life found outside the boundaries of the church. This artistic change encompasses also a rejection and even a blunt rebellion against old traditions. We can see this expressed in the painting of the Dutch artist Emanuel de Witte, which was painted in the mid-17th century, called The Interior of the Old Church. De Witte was part of the Dutch Golden Age, a period which came after the Renaissance of the Low Countries and is a continuation of this Renaissance. So let's look at this painting. It shows a beautiful Gothic church during a period called the Great Iconoclasm in Holland, a period in the 16th century in which Catholic churches and symbols were mutilated and destroyed by Protestant mobs who wanted to push out the Catholic Spanish influence in the country. Among the churchgoers, we can see children scribbling on magnificent columns and also a dog relieving himself. The church itself is presented in a beautiful composition and in real grandeur. De Witte doesn't try to obscure the beauty of the church, but he does express a strong contrast between the beauty of the church and the commonness and even vulgarity of those who come in through its doors. Note too the open grave in the foreground of the painting, a reminder of the fleeting nature of our world and perhaps the fleeting nature of all grandiose things in life. De Witte was part of a group of painters who lived in the city of Delft in Holland. Two other famous artists who lived in Delft at about the same time as him were Johannes Vermeer and Pieter de Hooch. Vermeer is the most famous of the three. Let's take a look at one of his paintings called The Lacemaker, which is in the Louvre Museum in Paris. By the way, it is a very small painting, about 9 on 8 inches. So as you can see, Vermeer was quite exceptional in inviting us into the most intimate moments of his subject's life. When I say intimate moments, I don't mean sexually intimate or romantically intimate. I just mean intimacy. He was able to shed intimate light on the most daily occurrences in his subject's life. In this painting, for instance, we are delicately invited into the lacemaker's life and into her immediate presence. I think it touches us in a very different way than Botticelli's Venus that we saw earlier. So let's look at another example of Vermeer's gentle feel of intimacy in a painting called A Maid Asleep, currently in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum in New York. In my personal opinion, looking at this painting, I feel this is a tremendous historical leap towards integrating intimacy into paintings and better understanding what that means to be intimate with a subject of a painting. Up until this time in history, we were never able to immerse ourselves so closely with a subject of a painting like we do in this one. Vermeer's sense of intimacy and the beauty of intimacy is, I feel, a great gift to the world of art. And unfortunately, like many other artists who were ahead of their time, Vermeer only received recognition many centuries after his death. By now, I hope you are beginning to feel how, historically speaking, we are leaving behind thousands of years of artwork inclined towards portraying the holy and the mythological towards a very different kind of artistic expression. The last artist that we will take notice of also came from the city of Delft, and his name is Pieter de Hooch. The reason I like de Hooch's work so much is that he has an appreciation and sensitivity to intimacy that occurs between people, and not only to the intimacy between us and the people he paints. So let's see how this is expressed in his paintings. Before us is a painting called The Courtyard of a House in Delft. The painting captures an affectionate moment between a young caregiver and a child. The next moment perhaps will bring with it a rebuke or tears, maybe a call to hurry up from the mother waiting in the passage, but for one brief moment, the artist is able to capture something that is worth keeping forever in our memories, a moment of connection. Notice also the inscription that appears above the passage. The inscription in Dutch reads, "This is St. Jerome's Valley. Please be patient and meek, for we must first descend if we wish to be raised." The inscription is gently covered by leaves and is also enveloped in a worldly scene, a world in which we must perhaps be patient and humble if we want to rise. And I think for the viewers who love children and spend a lot of time with children, you can really identify with that subtle message of Pieter de Hooch in this painting. I don't think that I'm exaggerating when I say that de Hooch is one of the first artists in European history who depicted smiling, normal relationships between children and adults, children who are not destined to be the saviors of the universe. We can also see this in a charming painting called The Bedroom. So in this painting, the little girl brings with her a breath of light, and for a moment, even the folding of the sheets by her mother seems like a light task. The simple manner in which de Hooch portrays human encounters raises historical and psychological questions. What changed in human mentality? What enabled de Hooch to see beauty and inspiration in family situations that up until his time were seen as merely daily chores or routines, unworthy of the stroke of the artist's brush? The last painting of de Hooch we will look at is called A Woman Drinking with Two Men, now in the collection of the National Gallery in London. At first glance, this painting depicts a conversation between people awash in a breeze of sunlight in a cool Dutch house. The woman holds a glass of white wine while the men appear to be singing. Note the painting inside the painting, hanging above the fireplace. You can tell that this is a painting with a little more Italian Renaissance quality to it. We see people kneeling in prayer while angels float above them. The painting has been identified by some critics as a painting called The Education of the Virgin, and some say that it represents a certain reproach by the artist towards his subjects and the coarse way in which they choose to spend their time, as also symbolized by the litter you can see on the floor. Personally, I think that the painting is layered with multiple meanings, trying to convey the complexities of the human encounter. The painting moves from the shady to the innocent, and maybe this is de Hooch's way of presenting the dual possibilities embedded in the human encounter. On the one hand, the possibility of a bright and graceful meeting between people, and on the other hand, the possibility of a void encounter, emptied of inspiration or meaning. In my opinion, the painting represents the striving for human connection, with all its hurdles and apparent sins. The inner painting, infused with heavenly figures who float above the human conversation, doesn't necessarily have to be interpreted as a blunt attempt at preaching moral values towards the subject of the painting. Perhaps, like the inscription above the passage in the first paintings that we saw by de Hooch, this is the artist's way of suggesting that the heavenly vision can be found in this actual world, not in the presence of angels and not in the presence of gods, but within our everyday lives, in the presence of every being we meet, inside our human conversation. And now we have come full circle and back to the book I and Thou by Martin Buber. Like the paintings of Pieter de Hooch, the book I and Thou strives to describe the sublime that exists between a person and his fellow beings, that exists within his relationships, in the space between him and his surroundings. The God of I and Thou isn't the God of the Italian Renaissance, but it is the God that is revealed in the brightness of a mother's smile, in the quiet moments shared between people who love and care for each other. It is the God appearing inside our daily lives, blossoming in the context of our human connections. It is the mysterious spark revealed to us through another person's actual touch. So thank you for listening, and I hope this has been an interesting journey for you, and I hope you understand Buber a bit better now. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and may God bless you and the people you care for.